The Wyoming sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered planks of Jack Colton's ranch house, casting long shadows across the dusty yard. The year was 1873, and the frontier had a way of aging a man beyond his years. Jack, at 43, looked every day of it and then some. His face bore the deep lines of a man who'd seen too much, lost too much, and carried ghosts that wouldn't rest. He sat on his porch, coffee growing cold in his hands, watching the horizon where heat waves danced like specters. The ranch sprawled before him, 500 acres of stubborn grassland that fought him for every blade. It wasn't much, but it was his. Bought with blood money from his soldiering days and maintained through sheer stubborn will. The morning ritual never varied. Coffee at dawn, check the cattle, mend what needed mending, and avoid town unless absolutely necessary. Dry Creek lay 15 miles east, a festering sore on the landscape that called itself civilization. Jack hadn't been there in near 3 weeks, and that suited him fine. His hand unconsciously moved to the Colt .45 on his hip, fingers brushing the worn grip before pulling away as if burned. 7 years since he'd drawn it in anger. 7 years since that terrible night in Kansas when his world ended with a single, senseless act of violence. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Little Sarah, barely 16, caught in crossfire during a saloon brawl he'd started. His daughter, his only family after consumption, took his wife. Gone because he'd been too quick with his gun, too eager to prove himself the fastest draw in town. Never again, he muttered to the empty air. The same promise he'd made standing over her grave. The gun stayed on his hip. This was still the frontier, after all, but it might as well have been welded in its holster. The sound of approaching hooves pulled him from his reverie. Jack squinted against the morning glare, making out a lone rider heading his way. As the figure drew closer, he recognized Tom Brennan, the general store owner from Dry Creek, one of the few decent men left in that hellhole. "Morning, Jack," Tom called out, dismounting with the careful movements of a man past his prime. "Sorry to disturb your peace." "Tom," Jack nodded, not moving from his chair. "Coffee's still warm if you want some." "Appreciate it, but no. Just came to warn you." Tom's weathered face creased with worry. "Things are getting worse in town. That Burke fellow's got his hooks in deep now. Even got Deputy Crow dancing to his tune." Jack had heard of Josiah Burke. The man had blown into Dry Creek 6 months back with money, muscle, and ambition. Bought the old saloon, renamed it Burke's Palace, and set about making himself the unofficial king of the town. The stories that filtered out to Jack's ranch spoke of gambling, women forced into unsavory work, and anyone who complained finding themselves on the wrong end of Burke's enforcer, a mean piece of work named Sykes. "Not my concern," Jack said flatly. "I keep to myself. Town keeps to itself." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "That's just it. Jack, Burke's been expanding, buying up land, forcing folks out. You're sitting on good water here. Only a matter of time before he sets his sights this way." "Let him come." The words came out harder than Jack intended. "I've got nothing he wants." "You've got water, land, and no one to back you up. That's everything he wants." Tom mounted his horse again. "Just thought you should know. And Jack, there's something else. He's got these 2 sisters working a saloon. The Morrison girls, May and Lily. Parents died of fever last winter. Left them with debts. Burke swooped in like a vulture. Bought their father's notes. Now they're working it off in ways that, well, it ain't right." Jack's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Not his problem. The world was full of people in bad situations. He couldn't save them all. Hell, he couldn't even save the one that mattered most. After Tom left, Jack tried to return to his routine, but the conversation nagged at him. He'd known the Morrison family in passing, decent folks who'd tried to make a go of farming before the fever took them. The older girl, May, would be about 26 now. The younger one, Lily, barely into womanhood. The thought of them at Burke's mercy stirred something in him he'd thought long dead. "Damn it," he muttered, saddling his horse. He needed supplies anyway. No harm in riding to town, keeping his ears open, just gathering information, nothing more. The 15-mile ride to Dry Creek gave Jack plenty of time to question his decision. Each hoofbeat seemed to echo with memories he'd rather forget. The weight of the colt on his hip felt heavier with each mile, a constant reminder of the promise he'd made and the man he'd sworn never to be again. Dry Creek hadn't improved in his absence. If anything, it looked worse. The main street, little more than a rutted track between ramshackle buildings, reeked of horse dung and human misery. Burke's Palace dominated the center of town, its false front painted garishly, promising pleasures within for those with coin to spend. Jack tied his horse outside Brennan's store, deliberately avoiding looking at the saloon. He had no business there. Get supplies. Get out. Simple? But simplicity had never been the frontier's strong suit. Well, well, Jack Colton gracing us with his presence. The voice oozed mockery. Jack turned to find Deputy Marcus Crow leaning against a post, badge glinting in the afternoon sun. Crow had the look of a man who'd sold whatever soul he'd started with for a piece of tin and the illusion of authority. Thin, weaselly, with eyes that never quite met yours straight on. "Deputy," Jack acknowledged curtly. "Heard you had a visitor this morning? Old Tom spreading his gossip again?" Crow spat tobacco juice into the street. "Man ought to mind his own business. Dangerous habit. Gossiping. Never know who might take offense." "I'll keep that in mind." "You do that. And Colton, mister, Burke's a businessman. Brings prosperity to this town. Anyone gets in the way of prosperity, well, that'd be disturbing the peace. My job to keep the peace." The threat hung between them, subtle as a rattlesnake's warning. Jack felt the old anger stir, the itch in his gun hand that had once made him the terror of 3 counties. He forced it down, turned away. Inside Brennan's store, Tom greeted him with obvious relief. "Glad you made it without trouble." "So far." Jack began gathering supplies, movements automatic while his mind churned. Through the store window, he could see Burke's Palace, even in daylight. Men drifted in and out, some staggering, others with the purposeful stride of those seeking particular entertainments. "How bad is it really?" he found himself asking. Tom glanced around nervously before answering. "Bad as it gets. Those Morrison girls. May tries to protect the younger one best she can, but Burke's patience is wearing thin. Heard Sykes saying something about teaching them their place. Made my blood run cold. Way he said it." Jack's hand stilled on a bag of flour. Sarah would have been 23 now. Had she lived? Not much older than the Morrison girls. The thought came unbidden, unwelcome, undeniable. "Not my problem," he said again, but the words rang hollow even to his ears. He left town as the sun began its descent. Supplies loaded, mind unsettled. The ride home seemed longer, shadows stretching across the trail like accusatory fingers. Every hoofbeat seemed to whisper questions. What kind of man lets evil flourish through inaction? What kind of man breaks a promise to his dead daughter? What kind of man was he, really, beneath all the justifications and excuses? That night, Jack sat on his porch again, but sleep wouldn't come. The stars looked down impassively, offering no answers. Somewhere in Dry Creek, 2 young women faced another night of degradation. Somewhere in the past, a grave held a girl who'd never see 23. "I can't," he whispered to the darkness. "I promised you, Sarah, no more violence, no more blood on my hands." But the frontier had its own logic, its own cruel mathematics. Sometimes, doing nothing was its own form of violence. Sometimes, keeping a promise to the dead meant breaking faith with the living. Jack Colton sat in the darkness, a man caught between 2 worlds, 2 promises, 2 versions of himself. The rancher who'd found peace in isolation warred with the gunfighter who'd never really died, just gone into hiding. Soon, very soon, he'd have to choose which man he really was. The night wind carried the distant sound of revelry from Dry Creek, and with it, perhaps, the faint echo of desperate prayers from those who had no one else to hear them. The acrid smell of cheap whiskey and cheaper perfume hit Jack the moment he pushed through the doors of Burke's palace. He'd fought this decision for 3 days, each night haunted by Tom's words and memories of Sarah. Finally, against every instinct screaming at him to stay away, he'd come to town on the pretense of needing horseshoe nails. The saloon was exactly what he'd expected: gaudy, loud, and thick with smoke. Men hunched over card tables, their eyes glazed with drink and greed. Along the bar, working women in faded dresses smiled emptily at anyone with coin to spend. Jack's stomach turned as he recognized the forced nature of those smiles, the deadness behind the eyes. He ordered a whiskey he didn't want, using it as an excuse to survey the room. No sign of Burke or his enforcer Sykes. But he spotted Deputy Crow at a corner table, deep in his cups and losing badly at poker. "You're Jack Colton." The soft voice made him turn. A young woman stood beside him, maybe 21, with wheat-colored hair and eyes that hadn't quite lost all their light. She wore one of those gaudy saloon dresses, but she carried herself with a dignity that transcended the tawdry outfit. "You're the Morrison girl, Lily." She nodded, glancing nervously around. "My sister said you knew our parents, said you were decent." Before Jack could respond, a harsh voice cut through the saloon noise. "Lily, you're not paid to chat. Get back to work." The speaker emerged from a back room, Josiah Burke in the flesh. He was a big man running to fat, with the soft look of someone who let others do his dirty work. His clothes were too fine for Dry Creek, his rings too showy, everything about him screaming of a man who took what he wanted and devil take the hindmost. Burke's piggy eyes fixed on Jack. "Don't believe we've been properly introduced. Josiah Burke. I own this establishment." "I know who you are." "And I know who you are. The hermit rancher. The man who thinks he's too good for civilization." Burke's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Yet here you are, sampling my hospitality." "Just leaving." Jack set down his untouched whiskey. Now, no need for rudeness. Lily, poor mister. Colton, another drink. On the house." Burke's hand clamped on Lily's shoulder, making her flinch. "And maybe you could show him our hospitality." "I'm fine," Jack said flatly. "I insist." Burke's voice hardened. "Man comes into my place. Least he can do is accept my generosity, unless he thinks he's too good for it." The challenge hung in the air, around them. Conversations died as men sensed potential violence. Jack saw Sykes materialize from nowhere, standing near Burke with his hand resting on his gun. The enforcer was everything his boss wasn't: lean, hard, with the dead eyes of a natural killer. "Leave him be, Burke!" A new voice, female, steady despite an underlying tremor. "He said he's leaving." Mae Morrison stepped from behind the bar, where her sister still retained some innocence. Mae looked like someone who'd seen too much, aged beyond her 26 years. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, her dress modest compared to the other girls. She moved to stand beside Lily, subtly pulling her sister away from Burke's grip. Well, the protective older sister. Burke's eyes glittered dangerously. "Always interfering, aren't you? May always making things difficult. Maybe it's time we discussed your attitude. In private." "Please, Mr. Burke," Lily said quickly. "We'll work extra shifts. We won't cause trouble." "Trouble?" Burke laughed, an ugly sound. "You've been nothing but trouble since you got here. Can't even do the simple things I ask. Like that private party last week. What did you say again? Mae?" Mae's chin lifted. "I said no. We serve drinks. Nothing more. That was our agreement." Agreements change. Burke nodded to Sykes. "Take them both to the back room. Time for a new understanding." "No!" Lily's voice cracked with panic. Jack watched it unfold like a nightmare in slow motion. Sykes moving forward, his intent clear. May stepping in front of her sister, defiant despite her fear. Other patrons carefully looking away. Even Deputy Crow suddenly fascinated by his cards. The casual evil of it. The assumption that power meant the right to take whatever you wanted. Sarah's face flashed before his eyes. Not as he'd last seen her, broken and bloody, but laughing in the sunlight, alive with possibility. These weren't his daughters, but they were someone's. Once, they'd had parents who loved them, dreams of their own, hopes for something better than this. That's enough. Jack barely recognized his own voice, low and dangerous. The saloon fell silent. Burke turned, eyebrows raised. Excuse me, I said that's enough. The ladies clearly don't want to go with you. The ladies work for me. They'll do as they're told. No, Jack said simply. They won't. Sykes's hand moved toward his gun. Boss, want me to... I took it off. Please. May's voice cracked, barely above a whisper. She was fumbling with the brooch at her throat. Her mother's brooch, Jack recognized it now. Her hands shook as she held it out to Burke. This is real silver. It's worth something. Take it instead. Please, just leave Lily alone tonight. The desperation in her voice, the way Lily's face crumbled at her sister's sacrifice, the casual cruelty of it all, something broke inside Jack. 7 years of carefully maintained control, of promises and isolation and trying to be a different man, shattered like glass. He moved without conscious thought. One moment he was standing at the bar. The next he had Burke's fancy shirt twisted in his fist, slamming the man against the wall. Gasps echoed through the saloon. Touch them again, Jack said quietly, and I'll kill you. Burke's face purpled. Sykes! Jack heard the whisper of steel clearing leather behind him. Time slowed to a crawl. His hand found his own gun with the muscle memory of 1,000 draws. He spun, the Colt coming up smooth and easy, like greeting an old friend. Sykes had his gun half drawn when he found himself looking down the barrel of Jack's .45. The enforcer froze, suddenly remembering stories he'd heard about Jack Colton, the Kansas gunfighter who'd vanished 7 years back. Drop it, Jack said. Sykes hesitated, calculating odds. Something in Jack's eyes made the calculation simple. The gun clattered to the floor. Smart man. Jack kept his gun trained on Sykes while addressing Burke. The Morrison sisters are leaving with me. Their debt, whatever fake numbers you've conjured up, is paid. You'll burn their papers. You can't, Burke started. Jack thumbed back the hammer. The click was loud as thunder in the silent saloon. I am. Deputy Crow, Burke shouted. Arrest this man! Crow half stood, then caught Jack's glance and slowly sank back down. Didn't see nothing. Mr. Burke, man's just collecting what's his. You're making a mistake, Colton, Burke snarled. A big mistake. Probably. Jack backed toward the door, motioning the sisters to follow. Add it to the list. May grabbed Lily's hand, both women moving quickly. As they reached the door, May paused, looking back at Jack with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Why? Because someone should have, a long time ago. Jack kept his gun on Sykes. Now go, get outside. They fled. Jack continued his backward movement, every patron in the saloon frozen like a tableau. At the door, he paused. Burke, you come after them. You deal with me, and I'm done talking. He holstered his gun with practiced ease. 7 years I kept that promise, Sarah, he whispered, too low for anyone to hear. 7 years! Forgive me! Then he was outside, the night air cool on his face, the sisters huddled by his horse, Lily crying, May trying to comfort her while looking like she might collapse herself. Can you ride? Jack asked. May nodded. We have horses at the livery. Get them! Quick! As the sisters hurried away, Jack stood guard, watching the saloon door. His hands were steady, but inside, a storm raged. He'd drawn his gun, threatened to kill. The promises he'd made over Sarah's grave lay broken at his feet. But looking at those two frightened young women, thinking of what would have happened if he'd stayed silent, he couldn't bring himself to fully regret it. Some promises, perhaps, were meant to be broken when keeping them meant allowing evil to flourish. The sisters returned with their horses sad, sway-backed things that spoke of Burke's generosity in allowing them to keep their animals. "Where will we go?" Lily asked, voice small. "My ranch, for now." Jack mounted up. "It's 15 miles. Can you make it?" "We can make it," May said firmly. As they rode out of Dry Creek, Jack didn't look back. He couldn't. Behind them lay 7 years of peace, of isolation, of trying to be a different man. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and likely violence. But also, perhaps, redemption. Not for the past, nothing could bring Sarah back. But maybe, just maybe, saving these two would balance the ledger a little. Maybe his daughter, wherever she was, would understand. The stars wheeled overhead as they rode into the darkness. 3 damaged souls fleeing toward an uncertain dawn. Behind them, Burke's palace blazed with light and fury, and plans for revenge were already being made. The ride through the darkness seemed endless. Jack led the way, his ears straining for sounds of pursuit while the Morrison sisters followed on their worn-out mounts. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound might herald Burke's men, but the night remained quiet, except for the rhythm of hoofbeats and Lily's occasional stifled sob. "How much further?" May asked, her voice tight with exhaustion and worry. 5 miles, maybe less. Jack glanced back at them. Even in the moonlight, he could see their fatigue. "There's a creek up ahead. We'll water the horses." At the creek, while the horses drank, Jack studied the sisters properly for the first time. May sat stiffly, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. Lily leaned against her sister, trembling despite the warm night. "You're safe now," Jack said quietly. May's laugh was bitter. "Safe? You just made yourself Burke's enemy for 2 strangers. Why would you do that?" Jack didn't answer immediately. How could he explain about Sarah? About promises broken and kept? About the weight of watching evil flourish while good men did nothing? "Because it was right," he said finally. "Right," May shook her head. "Right doesn't exist in Dry Creek. Only power and those without it." "Maybe, but that doesn't mean we stop trying." They reached the ranch as dawn painted the eastern sky pink and gold. Jack had never been so glad to see his modest, spread the 2-room house, the barn, the corral where his few horses nickered in greeting. It wasn't much, but it was defensible. And more importantly, it was 15 miles from Burke. "It's not fancy," Jack said, dismounting, "but it's solid." Lily gazed around with wide eyes. "It's peaceful," she whispered. I'd forgotten what peaceful looked like. "Inside?" Jack stirred up the fire and put coffee on while the sisters stood awkwardly in his small main room. He'd lived alone so long, the presence of others felt strange, almost intrusive. But seeing their exhaustion, their fear slowly giving way to cautious relief, he pushed aside his discomfort. "There's only 1 bedroom," he said. "You two take it. I'll bunk in here." "We can't," May started. "You can and you will. There's water for washing, and I'll rustle up some food. Then you need sleep. We'll figure out the rest later." May's eyes narrowed slightly. "The rest? Burke won't let this go. You know that." The fear returned to both sisters' faces. Lily clutched May's hand. "Then we'll leave." May said, "Head to California, or Oregon, somewhere he can't find us." "With what money on those horses, you wouldn't make it 50 miles. Jack poured coffee, his movements sharp. "No, you'll stay here until we figure something better." We're not your responsibility. Maybe not, but you are now, whether we like it or not. Over the next days, an uneasy routine developed. The sisters insisted on earning their keep. May took over cooking and household tasks with an efficiency that spoke of years managing on little. While Lily tended the vegetable garden Jack had let go to seed. They were quiet, cautious, flinching at unexpected sounds. Jack watched them from a distance, trying to reconcile their presence with his solitary life. 7 years he'd lived here alone. 7 years of silence and ghosts. Now there was women's laughter, hesitant at first, then gradually more genuine. There were 2 plates beside his at meals, conversation instead of silence, life where there had been only existence. It was May who surprised him most. He'd expected her to be broken by her ordeal, but beneath the wariness lay steel. She moved with purpose, spoke with quiet authority, protected her sister with fierce determination. When she thought no one was looking, though, he caught glimpses of vulnerability, a hand pressed to her eyes, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Silent tears quickly wiped away. 4 days after their arrival, Jack found her sitting on the porch in the pre-dawn darkness, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, settling into the other chair. "Too much quiet?" she said. "Strange how you get used to noise, even when you hate it." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then May spoke again, so softly he almost missed it. "My father would have liked you. He believed in doing what's right, too. Look where it got him, dead from fever, leaving debts he never really owed. And his daughters—" She trailed off. "You survived. That's what matters." Survived. She tested the word like it was foreign. Is that what we're calling it? Letting men paw at us for whiskey money, watching Burke look at Lily like she was meat. I took it off. That brooch, my mother's brooch. I would have given him anything to leave her alone. My dignity, my body, anything. What kind of surviving is that? The kind that keeps your sister safe. The kind that takes more courage than any gunfight. May turned to look at him then. Really look at him. You talk like you understand. I had a daughter once, Sarah. The name still hurt to say. She died because I was too proud, too quick with my gun, 16 years old, and she paid for my sins. So yes, I understand doing whatever it takes to protect someone you love, and I understand the cost. I'm sorry, May whispered. Don't be, just don't let Burke win. Don't let what he did define who you are. Easy to say, but some of the tension had left her shoulders. No, Jack admitted. It's not. As the sun rose, painting the ranch in golden light, Lily emerged from the house, yawning. May, oh, she stopped, seeing Jack. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not, Jack said, standing. I need to check the north pasture anyway. As he walked away, he heard Lily ask her sister if she was all right, heard May's reassuring response. Family, he thought, they still had each other. That was more than he'd had in 7 years. The peace couldn't last. Jack knew it, had been preparing for it. He cleaned and oiled his guns, checked his ammunition, rode the perimeter of his property looking for signs of scouts. But when trouble came, it came from an unexpected direction. Tom Brennan arrived on the 8th day, his face grim. Jack, we got a problem. Burke. Worse, he's got the law involved. Judge Carter's coming to town next week for the circuit court. Burke's filed charges against you: kidnapping, theft, assault. Says you stole his legally contracted workers. Jack felt the sisters tense behind him. They'd come out at Tom's arrival. Those contracts aren't worth the paper they're written on. Jack said, maybe not to you or me, but Judge Carter, well, Burke's been generous with him in the past, and with Deputy Crow backing Burke's version, Tom shook his head. They'll come for you legal-like, with a posse and warrants. Let them come. Jack, be reasonable. You can't fight the law. I can when the law's been bought. Tom sighed. What about the girls? They'll be taken back, and after this stunt, Burke won't be gentle. We'll run, May said suddenly. Tonight, we'll take supplies and… No, Jack's voice was firm. Running means looking over your shoulder forever, means Burke wins. Then what do we do? Lily asked, voice trembling. Jack looked at the three faces turned toward him. Tom worried, Lily frightened, May trying to be strong. Once, he'd have met this challenge with guns blazing. Consequences be damned. But that man had died with Sarah. The man he'd tried to become would have avoided the conflict entirely. So what was he now? We prepare, he said finally. Tom, spread the word to anyone who'll listen. The truth about Burke, about what really happened. Maybe some folks are tired of being under his thumb. That's a dangerous game. Jack, it's the only game left. He turned to the sisters. I'll teach you to shoot, both of you. If trouble comes, you need to be able to defend yourselves. I won't kill anyone, Lily said quickly. Don't need to. Just need them to think you will. Over the next days, the ranch became a fortress of preparation. Jack taught the sisters to handle guns, their initial fumbling gradually giving way to competence. May took to it with grim determination, while Lily remained reluctant but recognized the necessity. In the evenings, they planned, maps spread on the table, escape routes marked, supplies cached in strategic locations, and underneath it all, an unspoken understanding grew. They were no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were something else. Not quite family, but moving in that direction. One evening, as Jack showed May how to clean a rifle, their hands touched accidentally. Both pulled back as if burned, then caught each other's eyes. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps of kindred spirits who'd both lost too much to easily trust again. Thank you, May said softly, for everything. Don't thank me yet, this isn't over. No, but for the first time in months, I have hope. That's worth thanking you for. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Whether they brought cleansing rain or destruction remained to be seen. But for now, in this moment, 3 wounded souls had found something worth fighting for each other, and the possibility of a future free from the shadows of the past. Burke was coming. The law, corrupt as it was, stood with him. They were outnumbered, outgunned, with nowhere to run that he wouldn't follow. But as Jack watched May and Lily practice their shooting in the fading light, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 7 years. Not hope, exactly, but determination. Burke had made a mistake. He'd given Jack something to protect again, and this time, Jack would not fail. The storm was coming, but they would meet it together. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch as Jack worked on repairing a section of fence. 2 weeks had passed since the Morrison sisters arrived, and the place had transformed in subtle ways. Curtains now hung in windows that had been bare for 7 years. Wildflowers sat in a jar on the kitchen table. The vegetable garden showed signs of careful tending. You missed a nail, May said, appearing beside him with a cup of water. Jack accepted it gratefully, noting how comfortable she'd become moving around the ranch. Eyes like a hawk. Habit from watching for trouble. She leaned against the fence post, surveying the land. It's beautiful here, peaceful. Most days, Jack resumed his work, though I reckon that's about to change. You really think Burke will come? Man like him doesn't forget being made to look weak. He'll come, or send others to do it for him. May was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking, maybe Lily and I should… No. You didn't let me finish. Don't need to. Answer's still no. You're not running, and you're not going back to him. You're a stubborn man, Jack Colton. Been told that before. He drove in another nail with perhaps more force than necessary. Usually by women who turned out to be right about most things. May's laugh surprised them both soft, genuine. The first real laugh he'd heard from her. Was that almost a joke from the serious rancher who barely speaks? Must be the company I'm keeping. Bad influence. Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary. May looked away first, color rising in her cheeks. I should check on Lily. She's baking bread. And last time she nearly burned down the kitchen. Jack watched her walk back to the house, noting the way the morning light caught her hair. Dangerous thoughts for a dangerous time. He had no business noticing such things. No right to feel the warmth that spread through his chest when she smiled. That evening, they gathered for supper as had become their custom. Lily's bread had turned out better than expected, and the mood was lighter than usual. Even Jack found himself drawn into the conversation as Lily regaled them with a story about their childhood dog. He was convinced he was a fierce guard dog. Lily laughed. But he was terrified of chickens. Our rooster would chase him around the yard. She stopped mid-sentence, face paling. Jack heard 2 horses approaching, several of them. Inside, he ordered, already moving for his gun belt. Both of you, windows down, rifles ready like I showed you. The sisters moved without question, their 2 weeks of training showing. Jack stepped onto the porch, hand resting on his Colt, as 5 riders came into view. He relaxed slightly when he recognized Tom Brennan in the lead, accompanied by 4 other townsmen he knew by sight. Tom, Jack nodded. Gentlemen. Jack. Tom dismounted, the others following suit. This is Bill Harmon, owns the feed store. Sam Torres runs the livery. Doc Peterson, you know, and young Eddie Walsh from the telegraph office. Jack studied the men. Harmon and Torres looked determined but nervous. Doc Peterson met his gaze steadily. He'd patched up enough gunshot wounds to know what was coming. Eddie Walsh barely looked old enough to shave, let alone fight. Why are you here? Jack asked directly. It was Harmon who answered. Because we're tired of Burke running this town like his personal kingdom. What he did to those Morrison girls, it ain't right. What he's planning to do to you for helping them, that ain't right either. You know he's got the judge in his pocket, Jack said. This won't be a fair fight. When is it ever? Torres spoke up. But at least this time, we got a chance. You gave us that when you stood up to him. I didn't do it to start a revolution. Maybe not, Doc Peterson said quietly. But that's what you got. Question is, what do we do now? Jack considered his options. These weren't fighters, they were shopkeepers and working men. But they were here, risking Burke's wrath just by associating with him. Come inside, he said finally. May's got coffee on. The house felt crowded with 7 people in it. May and Lily served coffee with steady hands, though Jack noticed the way May's knuckles whitened when she gripped the pot. Judge Carter arrives day after tomorrow, Tom reported. Burke's been spreading money around, making sure everyone knows his version of events. Says you kidnapped the sisters, forced them to come here against their will. That's a lie, Lily burst out. We know that, Doc Peterson said gently. But Burke's got witnesses who'll swear otherwise. Sykes, Deputy Crow, 6 others who depend on Burke's money. So what do you propose? Jack asked. The men exchanged glances. It was young Eddie who spoke up. We fight back with the truth. I've been sending telegrams to the newspaper in Cheyenne. They're interested in a story about corruption in Dry Creek. And Doc here, he's been keeping records of injuries that come through his office, the kind Burke's men cause. That's evidence, Harmon added. Real evidence, not bought testimony. Evidence only matters if there's someone honest to hear it, Jack pointed out. There might be. Torres leaned forward. My cousin works for the Territorial Marshal's office. Says there's been complaints about Judge Carter before. One more big scandal might be enough to get him removed. Might isn't much to hang our hopes on. It's more than we had before, May said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Mr. Burke kept records too, in his office at the saloon. Records of debts, of payments, of arrangements. If we could get those, That's suicide, Jack said flatly. Walking into Burke's place would be necessary? May finished. I know where he keeps them. I know when his office is empty. I could— No. The word came out harsher than Jack intended. Absolutely not. I wasn't asking permission. The room fell silent at the steel in her voice. Jack met her gaze, seeing the determination there, the same courage that had made her offer her mother's brooch to protect her sister. There might be another way. Doc Peterson said slowly. Burke's holding a big poker game tomorrow night. All the important men in town, including himself. He'll be distracted for hours. A diversion, Tom mused, while someone slips in the back. I said no, Jack repeated. And I said I wasn't asking permission, May shot back. This is my fight too. Jack, my sister's freedom, my life. You don't get to make all the decisions. They stared at each other across the crowded room. Jack saw Sarah in his mind's eye, another strong-willed woman who'd wanted to make her own choices. He'd protected her so fiercely he'd smothered her. And in the end, his protection had failed anyway. If we do this, he said finally, we do it smart. No heroes, no unnecessary risks. May's expression softened slightly. Agreed. They spent the next hour planning. The men would create a disturbance at the poker game, drawing attention. May would slip in through the back entrance she knew from her time there. Jack would provide cover from across the street. Lily would wait at the ranch with Eddie, ready to ride for help if things went wrong. As the men prepared to leave, Doc Peterson pulled Jack aside. That's a remarkable woman, he said, nodding toward May. Both of them are surviving what they have. They're stronger than they look. Jack agreed. I wasn't just talking about the sisters. Doc studied him. 7 years is a long time to punish yourself, Jack. Maybe it's time to let the past rest. After the others left, Jack found himself alone on the porch with May. Lily had tactfully retired inside, claiming exhaustion. You're angry with me, May said. I'm worried about you. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're trying to protect me the same way every man has by making my choices for me. That's not— Jack stopped, frustrated. I watched my daughter die because I failed to protect her. I won't watch it happen again. May moved closer, her hand settling gently on his arm. I'm not your daughter. Jack, I'm not Sarah, and you're not the same man who lost her. How do you know? Because that man wouldn't have walked into Burke's saloon for two strangers. That man wouldn't have taught us to defend ourselves instead of just defending us. That man wouldn't be standing here now, trying so hard to do the right thing that it's tearing him apart. Jack looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. In the lamplight from the house, her eyes were soft, understanding. I can't lose anyone else, he admitted quietly. I don't think I'd survive it. Then don't lose us, May said simply. Trust us to be strong enough. Trust yourself to be better than you were. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, a gesture so unexpected he couldn't move. Then she was gone, leaving him alone with the night and the echo of her words. Inside, he could hear the sisters talking quietly, getting ready for bed. Normal. Domestic sounds that had been absent from his life for so long. Tomorrow they would risk everything, their safety, their lives, their fragile new bonds. But tonight, for just a moment, they were simply three people who'd found each other in the darkness. Jack touched his cheek where May had kissed him, feeling something shift inside his chest. Not healing. Not yet. But maybe the first crack in the walls he'd built around his heart. Tomorrow would bring danger, choices, the possibility of loss, but it would also bring the chance to be more than just a ghost haunting his own life. For May, for Lily, maybe even for himself, he would try. The lamp on the porch flickered in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows across the yard. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another. The night was full of predators. Jack knew, but sometimes the only way to protect what mattered was to become dangerous yourself. He checked his guns one more time, then went inside to join his guests. His responsibilities, his family. He wasn't sure yet, but whatever they were becoming to each other, he would not let Burke destroy it. Not without a fight. The saloon glowed like a beacon of sin in the darkness of Dry Creek. Jack crouched in the shadows across the street, watching men stream in for Burke's high-stakes poker game. Through the windows, he could see the main room packed with the town's wealthiest and most corrupt. Judge Carter had arrived that afternoon, and Burke was pulling out all the stops to impress him.
"You sure about this?"
Tom Brennan whispered beside him. "No," Jack admitted, "but it's too late for second thoughts." Down the alley, May waited for their signal, dressed in dark clothes with her hair hidden under a worn hat. She'd insisted on going through with the plan despite Jack's protests, and looking at her determined face earlier, he'd known arguing was useless. Inside the saloon, Harmon and Torres had taken their positions at the bar, ready to create a distraction. Doc Peterson sat at a card table, playing his role as a harmless old man with too much whiskey in him. Everything was in place. Jack checked his pocket watch.
5 minutes.
The longest 5 minutes of his life since Sarah died. His hand rested on his gun, ready for trouble, but he prayed it wouldn't come to shooting. Not with May in there. Finally, a crash from inside the saloon. Harmon had accidentally knocked over a table full of drinks, starting an argument with Torres that quickly drew a crowd. Jack saw Burke rise from the poker table, his face red with anger as he pushed through to deal with the disturbance. "Now!" Jack hissed. May slipped from the shadows and disappeared around the back of the building. Jack moved to a better position, able to see both the rear entrance and the main room. His heart hammered as he counted the seconds. Inside, the staged fight was escalating. Harmon threw a wild punch that missed Torres but caught one of Burke's regular customers. The man retaliated, and suddenly half the saloon was involved in the brawl. Even Judge Carter was on his feet, shouting for order. "Come on, May, get in and get out." Through a side window, he caught a glimpse of her in Burke's office, working at the desk drawer with something in her hand. Smart girl, she'd brought tools to pick the lock rather than break it and leave evidence. Then everything went wrong. Deputy Crow, who should have been dealing with the fight, appeared in the hallway leading to Burke's office. Jack saw him notice the light under the door, saw his hand go to his gun. Without thinking, Jack moved. He couldn't reach May in time, but he could create another distraction. He picked up a rock and hurled it through the front window of the saloon. The crash of breaking glass cut through the noise of the brawl. "Someone's shooting!" a voice yelled from inside. Chaos erupted. Men dove for cover, women screamed, and Deputy Crow spun away from the office door to deal with this new threat. Jack saw May's shadow freeze in the office, then move quickly to finish her task. Burke was roaring orders, trying to restore calm, but the combination of alcohol and fear had taken hold. The staged fight had become a real one, with old grudges and resentments boiling over. May emerged from the back entrance, a leather portfolio clutched to her chest. Jack met her in the alley, grabbing her arm. "Move," he ordered, leading her through the maze of back streets he'd scouted earlier. They could hear shouts behind them, Burke's voice rising above the rest. "Find them! Check the office, Crow! You worthless!" They reached the spot where Jack had hidden horses, mounting quickly. As they rode out of town, Jack glanced back to see torches gathering near the saloon. The hunt would begin soon. "Did you get them?" he asked as they pushed the horses hard. "Everything," May panted. "Records going back 3 years. Debts, payments, and Jack. There's more. Records of other girls. Ones who didn't survive Burke's hospitality. Names, dates, even where they're buried." Jack's jaw tightened. "We'll make sure justice finds him, one way or another." They rode in silence for a while, the night wind cooling the sweat on their faces. Finally, May spoke again. You saved me back there. Crow would have caught me if you hadn't acted. You saved yourself. I just helped a little. Is that what you call throwing rocks through windows and starting riots? Helping a little? Despite the danger, Jack found himself almost smiling. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Thank you, May said softly, for trusting me to do this. Wasn't about trust. Was about recognizing I couldn't stop you. Maybe, but you still let me try. They reached the ranch to find Lily pacing the porch, rifle in hand. Relief flooded her face when she saw them. I heard shots, she said. Not shots, just some creative destruction. Jack replied, Everyone's fine. May got what we needed. Inside, they spread Burke's records on the table. Page after page of damning evidence, forged debts, illegal interest rates, and worst of all, a ledger tracking the employment of young women with cold, business-like precision. Some entries ended with small crosses next to the names. Sarah McKenna, age 19, deceased February 1872, May read quietly. Consumption, Burke claimed, but there's a note here. Refused private party, made example. Jack's fist clenched. How many Sarahs had Burke destroyed while good men looked the other way? We need to get these to someone who can use them, he said. The newspaper in Cheyenne. The territorial marshal. A horse whinnied outside. Jack was at the window instantly, gun drawn. A lone rider approached, hands raised. It's Eddie, Lily said. Something's wrong. The young telegraph operator nearly fell off his horse in his haste. They're coming, he gasped. Burke, Crow, Sykes, and about a dozen others. Maybe an hour behind me. And Jack, they've got Judge Carter with them. He's issued warrants. They're calling it legal. How many, Jack asked? 15, maybe 20, armed and angry. Burke's promising bonuses to whoever brings you in. Jack turned to the sisters. Take the documents and ride north. There's a line shack about 10 miles up. No, May interrupted. We've been through this. We're not running. This isn't a debate. 20 armed men. We'll find 3 armed defenders instead of 1, May said firmly. 4, if Eddie's willing. I brought my father's rifle, Eddie said hesitantly. Jack looked at the 3 faces turned toward him, May determined. Lily frightened but resolute. Eddie trying to be brave. They weren't fighters, but they were here, willing to stand. They want me, not you, he tried one more time. They want us all, May corrected. Burke can't leave witnesses. You know that. She was right. Burke had gone too far to turn back now. It would end tonight, one way or another. All right, Jack said. Eddie, ride to the Harmon spread. Tell them what's happening. Maybe we'll get reinforcements. Maybe not. Either way, someone needs to know the truth. As Eddie rode off, Jack began preparations. He positioned rifles at windows, overturned the heavy table for cover, filled buckets with water in case of fire. The sisters helped, their movements efficient despite their fear. Remember what I taught you, Jack told them. Aim center mass, squeeze, don't jerk the trigger, and keep breathing. I've never killed anyone, Lily whispered. Then aim low, wound a man. He's out of the fight same as dead, maybe more, since someone has to tend him. May checked her rifle one more time. Jack, if something happens. Nothing's going to happen. But if it does, I want you to know these past weeks have been the first time I've felt like a person instead of property since our parents died. That's worth fighting for. Before he could respond, she moved to her window. I see dust. They're coming. Jack took his position. 20 against 3. Bad odds, but he'd beaten bad odds before. The difference was, this time he had something worth surviving for. Whatever happens, he said to the sisters. You've both shown more courage than most people manage in a lifetime. Your parents would be proud. So would Sarah, May said quietly. Jack's throat tightened. Maybe she was right. Maybe his daughter would understand that sometimes protecting the innocent meant breaking promises to the dead. The dust cloud grew closer, resolving into riders. Burke led them, his bulk unmistakable even at a distance. Judge Carter rode beside him, lending the veneer of legality to what was really a lynch mob. "Steady," Jack murmured. "Let them make the first move. We're defending, not attacking." The riders spread out as they approached. Surrounding the house, Burke and Carter stayed back, letting others take the risks. "Jack Colton," Carter's reedy voice carried across the yard. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I order you to surrender yourself and return the stolen property in your possession." "Only property here is the evidence of Burke's crimes," Jack called back, "including murder. You sure you want to be part of this, Judge?" A pause, then Burke's voice, harder and meaner. "Enough talk, boys. Anyone who doesn't come out in 30 seconds gets burned out." "You do that. Everyone in the territory will know what you are," Jack replied. "Dead men don't testify," Burke snarled. May suddenly called out, her clear voice cutting through the night. "Judge Carter, I have documents here signed by you, authorizing illegal seizures, payment records showing bribes. Do you really want to add murder to your crimes?" Another pause, longer this time. Jack could see the judge leaning toward Burke, urgent conversation passing between them. Then Sykes spoke up from the left side of the house. "Boss says take them, dead or alive, don't matter which." The night exploded into violence. Windows shattered as rifles opened up from both sides. Jack fired carefully, picking his targets, trying to wound rather than kill. Beside him, May's rifle cracked steadily. From the other side of the house, he heard Lily's gun speaking too. The initial assault faltered as 2 of Burke's men went down clutching wounded legs. The others pulled back, taking cover behind water troughs and outbuildings. "That all you got, Colton?" Burke roared. "We can do this all night." They couldn't. Jack knew. Their ammunition was limited, and Burke had numbers. Time favored the attackers. But maybe, just maybe, help was coming. The siege settled into a deadly pattern exchanges of gunfire. Attempts to flank the house. Desperate defense. Jack moved between positions, checking on the sisters, redistributing ammunition. "I'm almost out," Lily said, her face pale but determined. "Make each shot count," Jack told her. "And Lily, you're doing fine. Just hold on a little longer." The siege had stretched on for nearly an hour when Jack heard the sound of multiple horses approaching from the north. His heart sank. Reinforcements for Burke would mean the end of their resistance. But then he caught sight of the riders in the moonlight. And hope flared. Tom Brennan led them, with Harmon, Torres, Doc Peterson, and at least a dozen other townsmen. Even old Samuel Wright, the baker who hadn't held a gun in 20 years, rode with them. They'd come. The town had finally had enough. "Burke," Tom's voice boomed across the yard. "Stand down. This has gone far enough." "Get out of here, Brennan," Burke shouted back. "This is legal business." "Legal?" Doc Peterson urged his horse forward. "Like Sarah McKenna's death was legal. Like all those other girls you buried out past Miller's Creek." A murmur ran through Burke's men. Not all of them knew the full extent of their boss's activities. Judge Carter tried to restore order. "Gentlemen, I am a duly appointed judge of this territory." "You're a bought man," Harmon interrupted. "We've seen the receipts. Carter, every bribe, every crooked ruling. It's over." The situation balanced on a knife's edge. 20 armed men faced each other in the darkness. Years of resentment and injustice ready to explode. Jack knew that once the shooting started in earnest, good men would die on both sides. Then May did something unexpected. She stood up, visible in the window, and began to speak. Her voice carried clearly in the still night air. "My name is May Morrison. 2 months ago, my sister and I were forced into servitude at Burke's saloon to pay debts we never truly owed. We were threatened, degraded, And worse, when Mr. Colton helped us escape, he did what any decent man should do. He stood up to evil. She held up the leather portfolio. I have here proof of Burke's crimes, names of girls who died, records of bribes paid, evidence that Deputy Crow helped cover up murders. If you men standing with Burke don't believe me, right away now. Because when the territorial marshal sees these documents, anyone still standing with Burke will hang beside him. She's lying, Burke snarled, but uncertainty flickered across several faces among his hired guns. Lily appeared at another window. She's not lying. We lived it. We survived what others didn't, and we'll testify to every bit of it in a real court, before real judges. One of Burke's men, a younger fellow named Clayton, slowly lowered his rifle. I didn't sign on for killing women, Mr. Burke, or covering up murders. You signed on to do what you're told, Sykes snapped. No, Clayton said, backing his horse away. I signed on to work cattle and protect property, not this. Two more men followed Clayton's lead, peeling away from Burke's group. The odds were shifting. Deputy Crow, sensing the change, tried to salvage the situation. Now hold on, everybody. Let's not be hasty. I'm sure we can work this out. The only thing we're working out is whether you hang for corruption or murder. Tom Brennan said flatly. Your choice. Crow. Jack watched it all from his position, gun ready but hoping he wouldn't need it. Sometimes, he realized, the most powerful weapon wasn't a bullet but the truth, spoken boldly. Judge Carter was the next to break. Mr. Burke, I believe we should reconsider our position. Perhaps a more thorough investigation. You spineless worm. Burke's composure finally cracked. I own you. I own this whole damn town. No, Jack called out, standing so all could see him. You don't. You never did. You just made folks believe it for a while. But that's over now. Burke's face contorted with rage. In one fluid motion, he drew his pistol and aimed at Jack. Time slowed to a crawl. Jack saw the muzzle flash, heard May scream his name, felt the bullet whiz past his ear. His response was instinct, 7 years of suppressed skill flowing back like water. His coat cleared leather and spoke once. Burke's gun flew from his hand as Jack's bullet struck it, sending the big man reeling back in his saddle, clutching his numbed fingers. The next one won't be a warning, Jack said quietly, but his voice carried to every man present. It's over, Burke. You've lost. Sykes went for his gun, but found himself looking at rifle barrels from both the house and the townsmen. He froze, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. Smart move, Jack told him. Now unbuckle that gun belt. Slow. One by one, Burke's remaining men disarmed. Some looked relieved, others sullen, but none were willing to die for a lost cause. Judge Carter sat slumped in his saddle, his career and likely his freedom gone. Lily, bring some rope, Jack called. Gentlemen, if you'd be so kind as to help secure our prisoners. As the townsmen moved to comply, May appeared at Jack's side. Her hands shook as she reached for him. I thought he'd killed you. When he fired. Takes more than Josiah Burke to put me down, Jack said, trying for lightness. But his own hands weren't entirely steady as he holstered his gun. You didn't kill him, she observed. You could have. Killing him would have been easy. Making him face justice. Letting those girls' families see him hang legal and proper, that's harder. But it's right. Tom Brennan approached, a grin splitting his weathered face. That was some shooting. Jack, haven't seen marksmanship like that since you left Kansas. Let's hope I don't need to display it again. As Burke and his cohorts were tied and loaded onto horses, Doc Peterson examined the evidence May had risked so much to obtain. His face grew graver with each page. This is worse than we thought, he said. The territorial marshal needs to see this immediately. Hell, the governor needs to see it. Eddie can send telegrams at first light, Harmon suggested. By tomorrow afternoon, every newspaper in Wyoming will know what's been happening here. Burke, his hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage, finally found his voice again. You think this changes anything? I've got money, connections. I'll be out in a week. Maybe, Jack conceded. But those girls you hurt, their stories will be heard. Their families will know what happened. And every decent person in this territory will know your name and what you are. Money can't buy you a new reputation. And money can't bring back the dead, May added quietly. But at least they'll have justice. As dawn broke over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the procession prepared to head back to town. Burke, Sykes, Crow, and Judge Carter would be held until the territorial marshal arrived. The evidence would be preserved, testimonies gathered. Jack stood on his porch, watching the sunrise. The night's violence had stirred old memories, old skills, but somehow they didn't pain him the way they once had. He'd used his gun not for pride or anger, but to protect innocent people. Sarah would understand that. Maybe she'd even approve. We should go with them, May said, joining him. Make sure the documents are properly handled. In a bit, let me just... Jack paused, searching for words. 7 years I've watched the sun rise from this porch. 7 years of being alone with my ghosts. This morning feels different. Because you're not alone anymore. He looked at her brave Mae Morrison, who'd risked everything for justice and her sister's safety, who'd stood beside him against overwhelming odds without flinching, who'd somehow found cracks in the walls he'd built around his heart. No, he said softly, I'm not alone anymore. Lily emerged from the house, looking tired but triumphant. Are we really safe now? Is it really over? This part is, Jack told her. Burke won't hurt anyone again. You and your sister are free to build whatever life you want now. What if... Lily glanced between Jack and May. What if we wanted to build it here? I mean, if that's all right, we could pay rent, work for our keep. Lily, May said warningly. What? Someone needs to say it. We've got nowhere else to go, and Jack needs help with this place. And you two keep making moon eyes at each other when you think no one's looking. That's enough, May said, her cheeks flushing. Jack found himself chuckling, actually chuckling for the first time in 7 years. Your sister's got a point. This place could use a woman's touch. Or 2 women's touches, and I'm getting too old to manage everything myself. Is that a business proposal? Mr. Colton, May asked, attempting dignity despite her embarrassment. Call it a starting point for negotiations, Jack replied. We'll work out the details once this mess is sorted. As they prepared to ride to town with the others, Jack took one last look around his ranch. It looked the same as it had yesterday. The worn buildings, the stubborn grassland, the endless sky. But it felt different. Lighter somehow, as if the ghosts that had haunted it were finally at peace. The rising sun caught the badge on Deputy Crow's chest as he sat tied to his horse. And Jack had a thought. Dry Creek would need new law. Honest law. He had no interest in the job himself. But Tom Brennan would do well. Or maybe young Eddie in a few years. The town had good people in it. They just needed a chance to step forward. Ready? May asked. Already mounted. Ready? Jack confirmed, swinging into his saddle. As they rode toward town, toward justice and new beginnings, Jack found himself thinking not of the past but of the future. There would be challenges, testimony to give, a ranch to run, relationships to navigate. But for the first time in 7 years, he looked forward to facing them. The man who'd ridden into Dry Creek weeks ago had been a ghost, haunted by loss and bound by promises to the dead. The man riding back was still Jack Colton, still carrying his scars, but he was no longer alone, and sometimes that made all the difference. Behind them, the lamp on the ranch house porch continued to burn, forgotten in the night's chaos, but it no longer seemed like a lonely beacon. Instead, it was a promise of home, of hope, of lives rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy. The storm had come and gone, Now it was time to see what could grow in the clear morning that followed. The sun hung high over Dry Creek as the procession entered town. Word had already spread, and people lined the main street, some curious, others hopeful, many simply stunned that someone had finally stood up to Burke's reign of terror. Jack rode at the front alongside Tom Brennan, acutely aware of the weight of every gaze. Behind them, Burke sat tied to his saddle, his wounded hand cradled against his chest, his face a mask of impotent rage. Sykes maintained his cold demeanor, but Jack noticed how his eyes darted nervously at the growing crowd. Deputy Crow and Judge Carter looked like men seeing their own futures crumble with each passing moment. "Lock him in the jail," Tom directed several townsmen. "We'll take shifts guarding until the marshal arrives." "You have no authority," Carter protested weakly. "We have the authority of decent folks who've had enough." Doc Peterson replied, "That trumps your bought and paid for badge any day," as the prisoners were secured. May and Lily dismounted near the general store. Jack noticed how different they looked from that night in the saloon, back straight, heads high, fear replaced by quiet determination. "Miss Morrison?" A woman's voice called. Mrs. Harmon, the feed store owner's wife, approached hesitantly. I owe you an apology. We all do. We knew what was happening at that saloon, and we did nothing." May's expression softened. "You were afraid. Burke made sure of that." "Fear's no excuse for cowardice," Mrs. Harmon said firmly. "But maybe now we can start making amends." Other women began approaching, some offering quiet words of support, others simply touching May and Lily's hands in solidarity. Jack watched it unfold with a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This was what community should be, people standing together against wrong. It had just taken too long to remember it. "Jack!" Eddie Walsh hurried over, telegram papers in hand. "I sent word to Cheyenne like you asked. The territorial marshal's already dispatched. Should be here in 2 days. And the newspaper, they're sending a reporter." "Good. The more eyes on this, the better." Inside the jail, they could hear Burke ranting, making threats and promises in equal measure. Jack ignored it. Men like Burke always believed their money and influence made them untouchable. They were usually right. But not always. Not today. "What happens now?" Lily asked quietly. "Now we make sure justice actually gets served," Jack replied. "Doc, can you and Tom organize the evidence? Everything needs to be documented proper-like. Eddie, we'll need sworn statements from anyone willing to testify." "What about us?" May asked. Jack met her steady gaze. "You two have done enough. More than enough. Nobody would blame you for walking away now." "Nobody except ourselves," May said. "We'll testify. Those girls Burke hurt someone needs to speak for them." The afternoon was spent in a flurry of activity. The evidence from Burke's office was carefully cataloged. Statements were taken and witnessed. Women who'd been too frightened to speak before came forward with their own stories of Burke's predations. The pile of testimony grew damning. Through it all, Jack couldn't shake a nagging unease. Burke had been too powerful for too long to go down without a fight. The man had contingencies, allies, resources they might not know about. His concern proved justified when a group of hard-looking riders appeared at the edge of town near sunset. 10 men, well-armed, led by a gunslinger Jack recognized from the old days Marcus "Red" Donnelly, a killer for hire who'd do anything for the right price. "Trouble," Jack murmured to Tom. The riders stopped outside the jail. Donnelly dismounted with the lazy confidence of a man who'd never met anyone faster than himself. His red hair caught the dying light as he surveyed the townspeople gathering nervously. "Here you folks got Mr. Burke locked up," Donnelly called out. "That doesn't sit well with some people. Important people who'd prefer he was released." "He'll be released when a judge says so," Tom replied. "A real judge." Donnelly's smile was all teeth. "Now that's where we have a problem. See, I've got a paper here legal-like saying Burke's to be transferred to my custody, signed by a federal judge and everything." "Let's see this paper," Doc Peterson demanded. Donnelly handed it over with a flourish. Doc studied it, frowning. This is dated 3 days ago, before Burke was even arrested. Mister, Burke likes to plan ahead. Donnelly said smoothly, Now, we can do this easy or hard. Your choice. Jack stepped forward. Hello, Red. Donnelly's eyes narrowed in recognition. Jack Colton. Heard you'd gone soft, ranching and such. Things change. Not that much they don't. Donnelly's hand hovered near his gun. You really want to do this for strangers? That's not the Jack Colton I remember. Like I said, things change. Jack kept his voice level. Turn around, Red, right away. This isn't your fight. It is when I'm being paid to make it mine. Donnelly's eyes glittered. Besides, I always wondered who was faster, you or me. Seems like a good time to find out. The street emptied as if by magic, townspeople scattering for cover. Jack was aware of May and Lily watching from the store, of Tom beside him, of the weight of every decision that had brought him to this moment. Please, May's voice carried clearly. There's been enough violence. Donnelly laughed. Listen to your woman. Colton, walk away. Let me take Burke, and everyone lives. Can't do that, Red. Then you're a fool. Donnelly's body tensed. The telltale preparation Jack knew so well. Burke, you watching this. This is what loyalty buys. From the jail window, Burke's voice rang out. Kill him, Donnelly. Kill them all if you have to. That was Burke's mistake. The naked viciousness of the order. The casual disregard for innocent life, it stripped away any pretense of legality. Some of Donnelly's own men shifted uncomfortably. That's your boss? Jack asked quietly. That's who you're willing to kill for? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Donnelly's eyes, but pride and profession won out. I took the job. I finished the job. Then I'm sorry for what comes next. Time stretched like taffy. Jack saw Donnelly's shoulder dip, the first motion of his draw. His own hand moved without conscious thought. 7 years of denial erased in an instant. The Colt came up smooth and sure, an extension of his will. 2 shots cracked almost as one. Donnelly's bullet whined past Jack's ear. Jack's took Donnelly in the shoulder, spinning him around. The gunslinger's pistol fell from nerveless fingers as he clutched at the wound. It's over, Red, Jack said, his gun still trained on the wounded man. Tell your men to stand down. Donnelly looked at the blood seeping between his fingers, then at Jack. Something like respect crossed his face. You could have killed me. I'm trying not to be that man anymore. Hell of a time to develop a conscience. Donnelly laughed, then winced. Boys, we're done here. Job's over. But Mr. Burke, one of his men started, can hang for all I care. Donnelly finished. I don't die for child killers. He looked at Jack again. You've changed. Colton, maybe that's not a bad thing. Doc Peterson rushed forward to tend Donnelly's wound while his men helped him mount up. As they prepared to leave, Donnelly called back, Watch yourself, Jack. Burke's got deeper pockets than mine. This won't be the last. After they'd gone, the town seemed to exhale collectively. Jack holstered his gun, noting the slight tremor in his hands, not from fear or adrenaline, but from the weight of what he'd almost had to do. May was suddenly beside him. You're all right. Yeah. He looked down at her concerned face. Just thinking, every time I draw this gun, I risk becoming the man I was, the man who got his daughter killed. But you're not him, May said firmly. That man would have killed Donnelly without a thought. You showed mercy. Mercy, Jack repeated. Sarah always said I needed more of that. Then honor her by keeping it. May's hand found his. But also honor her by protecting those who need it. That's what you did today. That night, the jail was heavily guarded. Burke had stopped his threats, perhaps finally realizing the tide had turned irreversibly against him. Judge Carter had broken completely, offering to testify about years of corruption in exchange for leniency. Deputy Crow maintained his sullen silence, but Sykes watched Jack through the bars with the cold calculation of a predator recognizing another predator. Jack took a shift guarding. Sitting in the sheriff's office with his rifle across his knees, Tom Brennan kept him company, sharing a bottle of good whiskey someone had donated to the cause. "Never thought I'd see the day," Tom mused. "Burke behind bars, the town standing together. You did this, Jack." "We all did it. I just provided the spark." "Sometimes a spark's all it takes." Tom was quiet for a moment. "What'll you do when this is over, back to the ranch?" "Yeah, it's home." Jack thought about May and Lily, about the way the house had felt less empty with them there. Might not be alone there, though. Tom grinned. About time. Man wasn't meant to live with ghosts forever. Near dawn, Jack was dozing in his chair when a sound made him snap alert. The back door of the jail stood open. Lock picked, he grabbed his rifle and rushed to the cells. Sykes's cell was empty, the door swinging wide. Burke remained in his cell, and for a moment Jack was confused. Then he saw the blood spreading across Burke's chest, the knife still protruding. "Sykes," Burke wheezed. "Said I was liability now." Jack shouted for help, but even as Doc Peterson arrived, they could see it was too late. Josiah Burke died as the sun rose, killed by the man he'd trusted most. Poetic justice, perhaps, but Jack felt no satisfaction. Just another senseless death in a long line of them. They found Sykes's trail heading south toward Mexico. Jack could have pursued, probably caught him. But standing there in the morning light, he made a different choice. Let someone else chase that particular demon. He had promises to keep to the living. "It's over then," May said when he told her. "Burke's dead. Carter and Crow will face trial. The town is free." "Are you disappointed that Burke won't hang?" May considered this. No, dead is dead. The important thing is he can't hurt anyone else, and his victims will be remembered, their stories told. That matters more than how he died. 2 days later, the territorial marshal arrived with a full complement of deputies. They took statements, reviewed evidence, and officially arrested Carter and Crow. The reporter from Cheyenne interviewed everyone involved, promising that the story would make front pages across Wyoming. As the dust settled and life in Dry Creek began returning to something like normal, Jack found himself standing once again on his ranch's porch. But this time, he wasn't alone. May stood beside him, watching Lily tend the garden with newfound enthusiasm. "Quite a few weeks," May said softly. "That they have been... Any regrets about breaking your promise to stay out of violence?" Jack thought about it. "No, I promised Sarah I wouldn't be the man who got her killed, the one who solved everything with a gun. But standing by while innocents suffer, that would dishonor her memory worse than any gunfight." "She'd be proud of you," May said, "for finding the balance between protecting others and keeping your humanity." "Maybe," Jack turned to face her. "May, I'm not an easy man. I've got scars that won't heal, ghosts that won't rest. But if you and Lily want to stay..." "Yes," May said simply. "We want to stay. Just like that." "Just like that," she smiled. "We're not easy either. Jack, we've got our own ghosts, our own scars. Maybe that makes us right for each other. The broken helping the broken heal." That evening, as they shared supper around the table that had been empty for so long, Jack felt something shift inside him. Not the dramatic breaking of chains, but a quiet settling. The past would always be with him. Sarah would always be his daughter, his failure, his reminder to be better. But the future was no longer an empty expanse to be endured. "To justice," Tom Brennan said, raising his glass. He'd ridden out to share the news that he'd been appointed temporary sheriff until elections could be held. "To courage," Doc Peterson added. "To new beginnings," Lily chimed in, her young face bright with hope. "To family," May said quietly. looking at Jack.
However it comes to be.
Jack raised his own glass, throat tight with emotion. To second chances, he said, and to those brave enough to take them. Outside, the lamp on the porch burned steadily, no longer a beacon for the lost, but a light welcoming home those who'd found their way. The land stretched endlessly under stars that had witnessed both tragedy and triumph, and would witness more of both in years to come. But for now, in this moment, there was peace, there was hope, there was the laughter of women in a house too long silent, and the quiet satisfaction of justice served. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. 6 months had passed since Burke's reign ended. The Wyoming autumn painted the landscape in golds and browns, and Jack stood in the doorway of the barn, watching May hang laundry on the line. The domestic sight still caught him off guard, sometimes proof that life had truly changed. "You planning to work or just stand there gawking?" Lily called from the garden, her voice teasing. She'd grown in confidence these past months. The frightened girl from the saloon replaced by a young woman who laughed freely and often. "Man's entitled to admire his own property," Jack replied, but his eyes never left May. "Pretty sure you're not admiring the fence posts." Lily shot back. May looked up, catching his gaze, and smiled, that soft, knowing smile that still made his chest tight. They'd been dancing around each other for months, neither quite ready to name what was growing between them. But the whole town could see it, and Lily delighted in pointing it out at every opportunity. Tom Brennan rode up, now wearing the sheriff's badge with pride. The election had been unanimous, the town eager to have honest law for the first time in years. "Morning, Jack, ladies!" He dismounted, his expression serious. "Got news you should hear." Jack tensed.
Sykes.
"No, nothing like that. He's long gone to Mexico. Far as anyone knows. This is about Judge Carter. His trial ended yesterday in Cheyenne. And guilty on all counts. 10 years hard labor. Would have been worse. But he gave evidence on 6 other corrupt officials. They're cleaning house across the territory."
Good,
May said, joining them.
What about Deputy Crow?
5 years. Could have fought it, but he took a plea. Seemed broken by the whole thing. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else. They found more graves out past Miller's Creek. 7 more girls, the newspapers running their names, trying to find family." A heavy silence fell. 7 more young women who'd never see justice personally, though their stories would now be told. "We did what we could," Jack said finally. "Can't change the past, only make sure it doesn't repeat." After Tom left, the day continued in its new rhythm. Jack worked with the horses while May tended the house, and Lily split her time between the garden and practicing her reading. She was determined to make up for the education she'd missed. That evening, as they gathered for supper, May seemed nervous. She kept smoothing her dress, tucking stray hairs behind her ears. "Something on your mind?" Jack asked.
We got a letter today, from St. Louis."
She pulled an envelope from her apron. "It's from our aunt, Father's sister. She heard about what happened through the newspaper stories." Lily's fork clattered to her plate. "Aunt Margaret, but she never answered our letters after Mother and Father died."
"She says she never got them. Burke must have intercepted them."
May's hands trembled slightly.
"She wants us to come live with her. Says she has room, money, connections. We could have a proper life in society."
The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jack forced himself to remain still, though every instinct screamed to protest. After everything, were they really going to leave? "It's a good opportunity," he made himself say. "St. Louis is a real city. You'd have chances there you won't find on a Wyoming ranch."
"Is that what you think?"
May's voice was carefully neutral.
"That we should go?"
"I think you should do what's best for you and Lily."
"I'm not going,"
Lily announced.
"I don't care about society and proper ladies' education. This is home now."
"Lily," May started. "No, we're happy here. For the first time since Mother and Father died, we're happy. Why would we leave? Because happiness isn't everything, May said quietly. Security matters. Future matters. What kind of life can we really have here? Jack stood abruptly, unable to bear more. I need to check the horses. He was brushing down his mare when he heard footsteps. May entered the barn, lamplight casting shadows across her face. That was cowardly, she said. Yes. You didn't let me finish. Jack kept brushing, unable to meet her eyes. Nothing more to say. Your aunt's offering you a real future. I'm offering, what hard work on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. You're offering home, May said softly. You're offering family. You're offering love, even if you're too stubborn to say it. His hand stilled. May, I know what St. Louis offers. Comfort, society, safety. And 6 months ago, I'd have jumped at it. But 6 months ago, I didn't know what it felt like to be treated as an equal, to have my opinions valued, to watch my sister bloom back into the girl she was before Burke. She moved closer. 6 months ago, I didn't know you. I'm not an easy man to love, Jack said roughly. I've got too much past, too many ghosts. And I'm not an easy woman to love. I've got my own ghosts, my own scars. But maybe that's why we understand each other. She touched his arm. Jack, look at me. He turned, finding her closer than expected, in the lamplight. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't want St. Louis, she said. I don't want society parties and proper suitors and a life that looks perfect from the outside. I want Sunday mornings on the porch with coffee. I want Lily's laughter in the garden. I want nights by the fire, feeling safe for the first time in years. I want you, Jack Colton. Difficult past and all. May, his voice cracked. I love you, she said simply. I've been trying not to, but I do. And if you don't feel the same, tell me now, and we'll go to St. Louis. But if you do... Jack didn't let her finish. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the longing of the past months, all the fear of losing her, all the love he'd been too scared to name. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Stay, he said roughly. Both of you. This is your home. You're everything. Was that so hard? May asked, laughing through her tears. Hardest thing I've ever done, including facing down Burke. Harder than proposing will be. Jack pulled back to look at her. Is that a hint? Call it a strong suggestion. Lily's already planning the wedding in her head. Speaking of Lily, Jack glanced toward the house. Think she's watching from the window? Absolutely. Probably taking bets with herself on how long before you actually propose properly. Jack laughed, really laughed. Can't disappoint her then, but I'll do it right, when the time comes. I'll hold you to that, rancher. They walked back to the house hand in hand, finding Lily trying very hard to look like she hadn't been spying. Well, she demanded, are we staying? We're staying, May confirmed. Lily whooped, throwing her arms around both of them. I knew it, I told Mrs. Harmon last week that you two would figure it out eventually. You've been gossiping about us. May tried to sound stern, but failed. The whole town's been gossiping about you. Mrs. Wright has a wedding dress pattern picked out already. 3 weeks later, Jack stood at the altar of Dry Creek's small church, Tom Brennan beside him as best man. The building was packed, the whole town turning out to see their sheriff marry one of the women he'd saved from Burke's clutches. Or perhaps, as Doc Peterson had said, to see two people who'd saved each other. When May appeared at the church door, wearing her mother's wedding dress altered to fit, Jack's breath caught. Lily walked beside her as maid of honor, beaming bright enough to light the whole church. Second thoughts, Tom murmured. Never. The ceremony was simple, the vows traditional. But when Jack kissed his bride, the cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. At the reception in the church hall, Stories flowed as freely as the punch. Eddie Walsh, now the town's official chronicler, was already composing the article he'd sent to newspapers across the territory. The hero of Dry Creek marries it would make good reading. "No more ghosts?" May asked, as they took a moment alone on the church steps.
"They're still there,"
Jack admitted. "But they're quieter, like they approve."
"Sarah would have loved this,"
May said softly. A church full of people who stood up to evil. Her father finally letting himself be happy. New sisters to keep him in line. Jack's throat tightened. Somehow, May always knew just what to say. "Dance with me, Mrs. Colton," he said, leading her back inside. As they swayed to the fiddle music, surrounded by friends and newfound family, Jack marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From that first night in Burke's saloon to this moment, it seemed like a lifetime, and yet no time at all.
"What are you thinking?"
May asked. That Burke was wrong. He thought he owned this town, owned people like property. But you can't own the human spirit. You can bend it, wound it, try to break it, but give it half a chance, and it'll rise again. Speaking from experience. We all are. Everyone in this room chose to rise. That's worth celebrating. The party continued late into the night. As Jack and May finally prepared to leave for the ranch, their ranch now, Lily hugged them both.
"I'll ride out with Tom and Mrs.
Harmon tomorrow," she said.
"Figured you two might want some privacy."
"Lily?" May scolded, but she was smiling.
"What, I'm not a child. Besides,
Mrs.
Harmon's teaching me to make preserves. Important skill for a ranch woman."
As they rode home under the stars, May tucked against Jack's side. He thought about the lamp they'd left burning on the porch. For 7 years, it had been a reminder of isolation, of loss. Now it welcomed them home to a life rebuilt from sorrow. "No regrets?" May asked sleepily. "Not one," Jack replied, meaning it completely. The ranch came into view, the lamp casting its familiar glow, but everything else had changed. The garden thrived. The house looked lived in, and most importantly, it was no longer a refuge from life, but a place to embrace it. They were home. They were family. They were proof that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in facing down outlaws or surviving tragedy. Sometimes the greatest courage is in choosing to heal, to trust, to love again despite all the reasons not to. The lamp burned on, a beacon of hope in the Wyoming darkness, and somewhere, perhaps a young girl named Sarah smiled to see her father finally choose life over mere survival. It had been a long, hard road from that night when desperation made May cry out in Burke's saloon, but every step had led here to love, to family, to a future bright with possibility. The past would always be part of them, but it no longer defined them. They had written a new story, one of redemption and second chances. And this story, unlike so many in the harsh frontier, had a happy ending. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Leave a comment below and let's connect. Share your thoughts about Jack, May, and Lily's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of courage, redemption, and frontier justice. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more people discover these amazing Western stories. Until next time, partners.